Yes. All right. So our first return to Coptic after the break for the holidays. I think it's been a month since we actually met, so we have some review to do. And we have exercises from lesson 12 to go over. We have quite a bit to do, but just getting started. There was a great question on Discord over the holidays about what is going on with the second person feminine. So basically, like, it looks different in just about every case, whereas almost everything else looks fairly consistent. So like, what's up with that? Why is it weird? One of the reasons that it's weird, I suspect, is that it just doesn't appear in writing all that much. So it's kind of hard to remember, hard to get a handle on. But another reason that it's weird is for all of these very deep etymological reasons that we are going to discuss now. So I'm typing all these things out. I've given 2 examples of second person feminine pronouns, and we're kind of just looking at the etymology of all of these forms. So the top group, these are the possessive articles, and then the bottom group are the perfect or preterite verbal prefixes. And you can see here, almost everything is exactly the same or very similar. The first person ending was originally just like an E vowel or a Y consonant, or, you know, all things in between. So it's the semi-vowel. So it changes a little bit. It goes from an A to an I in these 2 examples, but almost everything else is identical. So second person masculine is K, third person masculine singular is F, third person feminine is S, first person plural is N, second person plural is ten or eten, essentially. And then third person plural is U, like it always is. And everything else you could pretty much make yourself, given just the set of rules. I could give you a totally new thing and ask you put the pronouns on it, and you could probably do it just fine, except the second person feminine, because here we have pu and here we have r, and they are just totally different. So in an effort to explain that, I've put like the late Egyptian equivalents of these things, and you can see that when you look at the late Egyptian, the pronouns are actually totally consistent. So the first person is really just this classifier that means man. And, you know, I've done this from my perspective. If I were saying like my father, I would write it in late Egyptian like this because I'm male. A female speaker would say the same thing, but would write it in late Egyptian, perhaps like this, with a female first person pronoun. If I were a god, I might write it like this, or I might write it, let's see if I keep making that same mistake. I might write it like this, perhaps. I'm not sure if I've seen that. But the writing is almost totally consistent. It's the pronunciation that changes, right? This first person singular pronoun, I'm going to write it the same way all throughout the text. Here it's a ah, here it's an e, but basically the same. The K is identical in both Coptic and late Egyptian. Same applies to the others. There's a little bit of a wrinkle here in the second person plural because it's ateten instead of, you would expect areten, given the late Egyptian. I think that's probably just a case of what's it called, like assimilation, perhaps. You know, both like alveolar consonants, probably. Okay, and then the u, you know, the u is just the third person u that we know and love. But what's up with the second person feminine? Can anyone, let's try to speculate. What do you think is going on with this?
I can see that that it has a T ending in the late Egyptian, and the T ending disappears usually. It's not protected. There's nothing and nothing coming after it, so it disappears.
Right. That's exactly what happens. So this is something that we see all over Egyptian phonology. That final T tends to disappear, especially syllable final or word final T, especially disappears in pronunciation. What probably really happened is that the T was unreleased for some amount of time. This is the same thing we do in American English with our word final T's. It's why instead of saying cat, we say cat. We don't actually release the T at the end. So it kind of just, it sounds like just like a cessation of the flow of the word, right? The word just ends. There isn't a identifiable sound on the end of the word. So what tends to happen with that over time is that later generations reinterpret that unreleased T as something like a glottal stop. So cat instead of cat, right? And that happens because of the lack of releasing. So that's almost certainly what happened to the second person feminine. It was originally this cha sound. It was probably originally, like very early before Old Egyptian, it was probably K sound, and it was probably ki. And then the masculine was probably ka. So in the case of ka, it actually preserved the K sound. In the case of ki, it palatalized the K sound, and it eventually became this affricate like cha or ta, something like that. And then over time, it changed into just a regular T sound, just ta. And then it got unreleased and then lost entirely. So in the case of poo, there's a few things to try to explain here. One thing that I would want to include in this is the fact that this word probably had an A vowel in it. And we can see that. So, you know, this is the pre-nominal form of this word. There's also an independent form that I'm totally going to get wrong when I try to write it out because I never write it. I think it's poe, or poe, maybe just po. Yeah, po. And then poke. And then this one, I just don't know at all. I should probably have looked that up. Pof, pos, etc. It's probably like this, po. Okay, so what has happened in this, some question marks in here. I need to just look that up before I can explain it. But what's happened here is we have this same word as either a prefix to a noun or as an independent word. As an independent word, it carries its own stress. So this is the equivalent in English to the difference between my house and the house is mine. In the word mine, I have an independent word that has its own stress. And in fact, in English, you can see that a word like mine has actually preserved the final N on that word, on the word mine, that English lost when it is added to a noun. So we say my house, we don't say mine house anymore. And then we say the house is mine. So you can see kind of a similar phenomenon in English, actually, that I've never noticed before, where when these possessives are prefixed to a noun, they tend to become shortened and abbreviated. And the reason for that is very simple. The context that it's in provides the listener with enough information that it doesn't have to be pronounced as perfectly as it would have to be if it were kind of off by itself without a lot of support. The same thing in Egyptian. So when this word is, when it means, for example, yours, it's independently stressed and it's by itself. So it keeps this stressed A vowel, which of course in Coptic becomes a long O sound, so poke. When it's prefixed to a noun, it loses its stress and that A vowel becomes an epsilon. That's basically the gist of it. So it's an unstressed vowel and closed syllable. There's a lot going on there, but that you can expect to find an epsilon there most of the time. And let's see, anything else strange about that? So then in the case of poo, we still have kind of a weird situation. So the final T is being lost, or it's turning into just a glottal stop. And then we have this unstressed A vowel, which is now in a closed syllable, but it's probably a doubly closed syllable, because you'll notice in the late Egyptian writing of this, we have this semi-vowel here. We have this double reed leaf, which is like a Y sound. I think what probably happened is that through some phonetic mixing of the stressed A vowel, Y type semi-vowel, and then glottal stop, you got a shift in the weak vowel to a W sound. And that's something that we see all over the place. In Afroasiatic languages, generally, Ys and Ws are, they're deeply connected in this way. So they can often transform into one another for various reasons. You see it in, middle weak verbs in Semitic languages, that in one tense it will be an E sound, and then in another tense it will be an U sound. That's really the same consonantal root, and it's kind of, it's bouncing back and forth between those two possible realizations. So they're not quite allophones. That wouldn't be accurate, but maybe allomorphs would be a good way of visualizing it. So there's a single morpheme, which is kind of like weak consonant, and then that can be realized as a Y-type semivowel or a W-type semivowel. And that's probably what happened here to get us this U vowel, though I'm not totally sure. Okay, so that's as much as I know about that. I'm not claiming to have the complete answer. It's just, I know enough that it makes sense to me and kind of satisfies my curiosity, and maybe it does yours as well. But there's more we could say about that. We could figure out what this is. We could dig deeper to figure out why it's U, why isn't it something like peh with a glottal stop. Great question. I don't know for sure, but I suspect it has something to do with the quality of the vowel and the presence of the semi-vowel historically in that word. And then if we look at an example that seems totally out of left field, we have ar or are for the perfect second person singular feminine. Well, if you look at what the original word was, it was the verb iri, which means to do, conjugated in the sejameth form, and then followed by the verbal infinitive. So for instance, when I say a Coptic phrase like I voke, meaning I went, that's really I did going. So iri bak, I guess, in older stages of Egyptian. I did going. So in the case of the second person feminine, it's you did going, just the same, but it was originally this irech, and then iret, and then probably iret, just a glottal stop. Or aret, if we want to use the vowels that are actually there. So then you end up with aret vok, or aret vok, just like you have in Coptic, from the same source. So note that these pronouns are identical. The process of changing the T into a glottal stop was more or less identical, but because the word that pronoun is actually being placed on is different, the final result is something different. Does that all make sense? Any questions or thoughts about this? No? Okay. I don't actually know your Discord names and have them connected to your, legal names and your faces as I do in this. So if you're the person who asked that question and you're here, let me know whether I answered your question thoroughly enough or not. And of course, we can talk about it again in the future. But
I think they said they weren't going to be able to attend this week anyway.
oh, was that a person who said that? Oh my
I
gosh.
think so.
Okay, well, I will probably direct them to this YouTube video then, because that was pretty long-winded and I don't want to do it again.
Yeah. I think it's
Okay.
Choco.
Was it Choco? All right. So yeah, that's good. I think that's enough of that. Zoom in on this. Okay, so now we have a choice of what to do next. We have the choice of going through lesson 12, which I think has quite a lot of stuff in it that we need to review. Might be a little halting. I think there's a good possibility that we don't actually finish lesson 12 this week, and we just let it carry over to next time and then finish it up next time. And the other option for what we can do is we can review everything that we've gone over before. So do I have any votes on what to do next? How many people in favor of going over lesson 12? Okay, I got one thumbs up. How many people in favor of reviewing what we've done in the book thus far? Okay, we've got some votes for review. Okay, so that said, let's open up Lambda. I thought I had this open, but I don't. I've got chats. Sorry, whoever chatted me. Oh, lots of votes for review. Okay, cool. Easy decision then. So that means I'm going to pick on you. I'm going to try to pick on you fairly. But we're just going to run through the different exercises and find things that we're stuck on. So I assume you're not stuck on the concept of gender or prepositions, so we'll skip through that quickly. What about articles? Claudio, can you tell me about articles?
Sorry, could you ask me again?
Articles in Coptic, tell us about them. How do they work?
My English is terrible, sorry.
No, it's not. So these things, like the indefinite article and the definite articles.
I think he's asking to explain words like the and
I prefer to skip, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Let's see who's next on my list. Michael?
I guess you've got there in front of you the water is a water,
Yep.
and plural hen. You've got the p and t, don't you? So you've got masculine and feminine for the definite article.
Mm-hmm.
And a combined form for this the plural definite, which I can't remember. Oh,
It's okay. It's yeah. So yeah, that you covered it. I was gonna
call back rusty.
That's okay. I mean, that's why we're doing this. We're just gonna go through and make sure we at least refresh our memory on all of these things. Okay, so you have the indefinite articles like a water or some bread. So umo, hen oik, singular and plural. You actually do have a masculine and feminine singular indefinite article. It just happens that they are the same thing. So it's umo or I don't know, I need a feminine noun. Ushime, a woman. or urome, a man. So they're both u, but they actually do come from two distinct masculine and feminine. Do you remember, Michael, what word this comes from? This u?
No. Oh, yeah, vaguely recall you talking about it. I can't remember what it comes from.
So if you were to use, if you had to guess, let's say, I gave you guys a review exam, you had to guess the etymological origin of the indefinite article, what would your first guess be?
One?
Yeah. That's it. And it's one is y, or wait, wa? Y in Bohairic. Wa in Saidic is the masculine, and we is the feminine. And then both the masculine and feminine indefinite articles came from those words. And then, of course, once they're reduced in pronunciation, they just become identical. They become u. So
does that have any knock-on effects in other situations at all? I mean, like with the feminine pronoun, phenomenal pronoun we were just talking about.
You're saying, do you see like anything weird happening as a result of the masculine and feminine
if you've got
article?
a masculine or a feminine, even though they happen to be the same prefix in currently, does it affect words?
I don't think so in Coptic. I think it would have earlier, like if you were to actually listen to the pronunciation of a late Egyptian text, you would probably find some instances where the gender of the article caused it to have a different realization. But we see already in late Egyptian, which of course is, 1200 or more, 1500 years before Coptic, you already see things being written with the wrong gender article. So they'll write the feminine indefinite article all the time, even when the noun is masculine. So it seems like that confusion already happened really early. By the time of Coptic, any knock-on effects have been sort of buried by the length of time for those, the length of time that those things were identical. Yeah, it's a good question. Also an interesting thing to look for, like we could find our earliest examples of the indefinite article and look for any sort of correlation between the use of the feminine indefinite article and the word that it's being associated with. So is the feminine spelling more likely to be used on certain words, and can we find a phonetic reason why that situation might be especially prone to cause confusion about the gender of the article? It's possible. I just don't know. I don't think anyone's done that research. But yeah, definitely a good question. Okay, and then we have when and men. See who's next on my list. I want to pick on somebody else. Thank you, Michael. Dante, do you know the difference between when and men?
Yes, when means there is a, and men means there is not.
Yep, that's it. That's it exactly. Okay, I don't see much else to be said about that. And then that's lesson 2. Relative clauses. I'll stay with you real quick, Dante, since that last one was obviously too easy for you. What are the relative pronouns in Coptic?
Et, and then later on ent.
Right. And one more.
One more.
It's not on the screen now.
What's the other one?
Ete.
Ete.
Yeah, so they're used in different circumstances. So et is used in these adverbial sentences. So prome hempei, the man is in the house. Prome et hempei, the man who is in the house. That would use et. You would use ete with nominal constructions. So the man who is a soldier, I guess, the man who is a soldier. Prome ete umatoipe. For example, you would use eta in that circumstance. And then the ent relative pronoun is one that you would see with verbs normally. So the man who went would be prome entafok. So yeah, okay, good. Let's see, who am I going to pick on now? I have to look at all your faces. Looks like David. Can you explain to us the possessive articles?
Well, so they are prefixed onto the noun itself with the between the definite article and the noun. So we have, for example, for youth masculine, we have the P, and then we have the possessive pronoun a or ek, etc., and then the noun.
Yeah, very good. That's exactly how it works. What things have to agree in a phrase like the ones we see on the screen?
Well, I'm not sure that I understand.
So two things in any given one of these phrases. Let's say I'll take this one, our Father. Two of the things in that phrase are the same in terms of gender and number, and one thing is allowed to vary freely.
Yeah, so the definite article, the P, for example, has to agree with the gender of the noun, and
Right.
then the possessive pronoun depends on, well, the possessor, whether it's how many there are, it's a female or male.
Right. So the article and the noun are tied together, and then in the middle of them you have this independent possessor, which is a separate entity, generally a separate entity, and it can vary freely. So that's something that always causes confusion when people are learning this, is that, you know, the two things on the outside are actually linked and you know, grammatically connected to one another and must be identical in gender and number, whereas this thing in the middle is free to vary depending on what it refers to.
So these pronouns are like Oreo cookies.
Yes.
So at the top of this section, it says it is best to learn the forms as a unit. Is that just like based on Lambda's history as a teacher, or is there some like more like deeper syntactical reason or morphological reason why you should think of them as a unit instead of article plus pronoun?
So I can't say for sure what Lambda was thinking, but I have a guess. And my guess is that at this stage in lesson 4, he's not in the mood to explain the background of each one of these things just yet. So at this point, you haven't seen any other examples of this pronoun paradigm that we have now seen in you know, verbal prefixes or in the objects of prepositions, or all these other places we've seen these pronouns. At this point in the book, you haven't really seen them anywhere else. And I think he's just not too keen on explaining the etymological origin of each one of these suffixes. He kind of just wants you to learn them for now. So it's like memorize and don't overthink it just yet, because you're going to see a lot more examples. Once you get all those more examples, you can then start to analyze and find patterns and understand what's going on under the surface. So that's, I think that's the main reason. Is just a matter of sort of like didactic convenience. You have to learn things somehow. It's kind of a bootstrap process. So yeah, it's always hard to get students to just memorize something, because you don't want to give the impression that, you know, you're one of these like lazy teachers that expects your students to learn everything by rote and not ask questions. But at the same time, you have to get enough into people's heads so that they can actually start usefully analyzing it. And that means just memorizing some things for the time being sometimes. So I think that's part of it.
What is your philosophy on striking the right balance?
I don't have a philosophy. I normally try to feel it out, and I try to be adaptive. So it depends a lot on the collection of students I happen to be talking to and what they're having trouble with. It also depends very strongly on the level of interest. So if you're super interested in a topic, you will brave the long-winded etymological explanation because your interest will carry you through that. If you are, let's say you're taking Coptic as an elective at a college, and you have 3 brutal engineering courses that you have to do, 15 hours of homework for a week, you're probably going to phone it in on Coptic a little bit, which is entirely reasonable, of course. But then for me as a teacher, I'm going to have a really hard time spending half an hour explaining the etymology of all these pronouns, because you're going to get bored and it's going to be worse for you. So I would say it depends on the circumstances. My philosophy is to do what seems best for the given student. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And it's like life isn't perfect. We do the best we can. You don't always get it right. Anyway, so part of the reason he wants you to memorize it as unit. Another reason I suspect is that these are single stress units. Like the only word that has stress in Penyot is the word yot. So he probably doesn't want you kind of thinking of them as separate words. I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
Or perhaps students would say Penyot.
They absolutely will. They absolutely will say Penyot if if you set it up that way, they will totally do that. Okay, and then we have demonstratives. So pe, te, ne, not very interesting. Again, you see this same like ptn breakdown, where like p is masculine singular, t is feminine singular, and n is a common plural. That's something that is present in Egyptian going all the way back to really to Old Egyptian, but most accurately to Middle Egyptian. That ptn is like the way Egyptian divides up nouns, masculine, feminine, and plural. We learned this word ke, that means other. So kerome, the other man, and kerome, the other men. Pretty straightforward.
If you wanted to say something like no other man, how do you put that together?
No other man. Trying to think of a sentence.
Well, we talked about un and in order to say some bread, no bread.
Right.
Is it ever a case where it's no other ship? No other ship is in this port. No other man is on this road.
So in those cases, that is an adverbial sentence, and then it would be you would probably use men. You'd probably say, I don't know, I'd have to look up an example to be sure, but there is no other ship in this harbor. I would probably say men kejoy him temro or something like that. So there is not another ship in this harbor. And then if it were a verbal sentence, you would probably negate the verb. So another man did not come, for example, I think is how you say it. There is no Coptic word that means not another. You would just have to construct the phrase accordingly.
So that's something we'll be talking about in future lessons then.
I'm sure it will come up. Yeah. And a lot of these things won't ever come up, and that's kind of okay, because right now we're not really learning to speak Coptic, we're learning to read Coptic. And then when you do want to compose something in Coptic or try to speak Coptic, you have to look at evidence from existing texts. So that's one of the things that I use my interlinear version of the New Testament for, all the time is just to find examples of things I need. And then I have text only versions of those, like the Saidic and Bohairic New Testament text. And I do like regular expression searches to find some particular grammatical construction that I think should exist. So like if you ask me to compose a Coptic sentence like the one you just gave, and I just made it up out of my head, but I'm not sure that it's right, I would go and do like a regex search through one of those Coptic texts and try to find comparable examples and see whether mine has any precedent. And this is the case when you're working with a dead language. You don't get to ask a native speaker. You have to just kind of query the textual evidence, and that's totally normal. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay, nominal sentences, pretty straightforward. Payotpe, he is my father. Tamaote, she is my mother. We've seen those a few times. Usah pepayot, my father is a scribe or a teacher. Impayot anpe, it is not my father. Okay, and then here's that relative pronoun that I asked Dante about earlier. So prome ete enusah anpe, the man who is not a teacher. I'm just reading this one here. So that's where that ete comes in.
So does that relative go with the pe and te specifically?
Generally,
That
yes.
used-
Not always. It depends on whether the nominal sentence is constructed with pe and te. So not all nominal sentences are constructed that way. So for instance, I could say anokusah would be like I am a teacher, and then if you said like the school which I am a teacher in it, yeah, so that would be a noun phrase. So it would be, the word for school is anseve, but is it masculine or feminine? It feels feminine to me. So tanseve ete anok usa in hetes, I guess is how you would say in it. So I don't know how you say I am a teacher in a school in Coptic, but like that's a decent example. The school which I am a teacher in it would still use ete, even though there's no pe or te.
And you wouldn't use ent to construct that, or could you also do it with ent?
You could use ent.
That I am a teacher in, but then the school becomes sort of the subject, right?
Well, if you were to use, so the choice of the relative pronoun depends on the sentence that comes after. So ete goes with nominal sentences in the relative clause. If you wanted to use ent, you could use a verbal sentence in the relative clause. So you could say tanseve ent eis vo in hetes. So the school which I taught in it. So if you have a verbal phrase in the relative clause, you would use ent. Perhaps I should write these down.
But if you say the school that I am a teacher in, that's not a verbal sentence. The copula is not considered like a verb or something.
Nope. There's no verb in this sentence to speak of, and this is really a noun phrase, right? It's not the outermost phrase isn't actually a complete sentence. We'd have to say something about the school to make it a complete sentence. This is the sentence I'm making up, which is probably not 100% grammatically correct. No, disfo. So the school which I am a teacher in it, probably pretty good Coptic, and just ignore any minor second language type mistakes. And then the school which I tisfo is the word I know for teach. Is like give teaching literally. So the school which I taught in it versus the school which I am a teacher in it.
Oh,
That's your
okay.
choice of ete or ent. So it depends on whether you have, like here, you have a nominal sentence, anokusa, and then here you have a verbal sentence, I disval and hatus, I teach in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
And then you could also have, if you had something like the school, which is upon the mountain at Hemptol, something like that. So then you would use et if this were an adverbial sentence, the school which is on the mountain. Yeah, so 3 different ways to create a relative. Etymologically, they're all from neti, but they've gone through some stuff. They've seen some stuff, those relatives. And we'll see examples of all those quite a few times. It will eventually become natural to you to know which one to choose. Independent pronouns, pretty straightforward. Let's see, who can I pick on? Did I pick on GT already?
Nope.
All right. See if you can analyze these independent pronouns and just tell us how you would construct them. Like if you needed to make them from scratch.
So they're all basically of the form un or unt, and then followed by some ending.
So for
And
instance,
so if you ignore the first person case, it's basically all the same as the previous endings that we talked about. The k you feminine is its own special case, but then f for he, s for she, uten for you plural, and o for they plural.
yeah, good. So there's
And
this
then
base.
I and we just have their own special cases as well. But
Yeah,
it sort of
what's
fits.
up with I and we?
So we is the ending in on. It sort of matches the same constructs as before. I don't know what's up with the etymology of I.
Yeah, that one's weird. If anyone knows Hebrew, this is the like old school anohi versus the ani. You know, that pronoun shift. It's just very, very old. That's the short answer, is that it's very old. The K, that K final consonant is associated with the first person in certain cases. I think this is probably the only situation that survives into Coptic where K is associated with the first person. But it is a thing that happens elsewhere in older stages of Egyptian where you get Ks, especially in like the Middle Egyptian stative, for example. He is the first person stative ending. So it's probably from that. It's from this old first person thing. And then these are just weird. Although they are really rooted in the same this in particle that becomes into in the other cases. They're historically related. Not sure exactly what happened to make those totally different, but there we go. Yeah, okay. GT, great explanation. There are the abbreviated ones that we don't really need to worry about. These are all vocabulary. They're the interrogatives. Nim means who, ash means what, and u means what. Ash is more like which, if you're wondering what the difference is between ash and u. U is more vague and open-ended. Ash is more specific, like which one of a set of things is it? Uupe, it is a what? There we go. Intoknim or intaknim, who are you? Good stuff. Okay, now we're finally getting to verbs. I think we already talked quite a bit about the etymology of the verbs, literally I did going. So it's from the verb that means do, and then you get these prefixes, I, ak, ar, af, as, an, ateten, au. Okay, and then you can also put the perfect or preterite verbal prefix before a noun. So aprome voc, the man went. Or you can do it the other way, prome afok, the man, he went. Or the most common way, especially when you have a long noun phrase, afok enchi prome. So he went, namely the man. So that's all the verbal stuff for that type of verb. Adverbs, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about them because they are perfectly straightforward and probably do not raise any difficulties. And then prepositions. Prepositions in Coptic are just a real pain in the butt. I'm going to need someone to explain to me what's going on. What's up with these prepositions? TV, tell us about prepositions.
I'm also going to need someone to explain
Okay.
to me about prepositions.
Tyler, explain to TV about prepositions.
Please.
Oh, I have a strange system of how I've learned these prepositions where I've smashed together a bunch of different languages to do it. So, like, these are all sorts of, this is just a giant mess of them. These are the hardest things, right? Like with, right? Hin, on, hul, under, he. Wait, hin and he I always get mixed up. Which one's on and which one's in?
Hen is in and he is on.
Okay. Yeah, that's hard.
And you can get it by like reverse engineering their pre-pronominal forms. So in hate literally means in the belly. So in hatef means in his belly. And then he oof would be upon his back, literally, etymologically. So that can kind of help you to tell the difference, maybe.
Yeah, I'll try. But after living with a Spanish speaker for 10 years, you start to just mix them even in English. In and on. A is like towards, hichon, upon. There's so many. I can hardly give more than half of them of even a definition.
That's okay. So prepositions tend to come with time, and prepositions are so strongly linked to the specific language that they're being used in that I often recommend against translating individual prepositions. If you have a whole sentence with a preposition in it, well, then you can convert that to something meaningful in another language because you can just express the concept. But prepositions don't translate. They just don't. I can even come up with an English example.
Well, for example, at home, my husband's a Spanish speaker and they just have in for in, on, and that at, and it gives us endless fun as he'll be like, honey, you look great on those jeans. I'm like, yeah, I'll just strike a pose, right? But moving from one language to the other is always really tough with prepositions. And even within a language, it can be tough. But you just, use them in context and learn them that way. That's the same way I felt about the pronouns. I don't really like to learn them all together or pick it apart. I just get simple sentences you can understand and just practice learning the difference between in the water and on the water or something.
Right.
That's how I go.
Yeah, then you'll just be able to kind of feel it out. That works much better. What about, like, what are these two things, like ha and haro? What are those? Why do we have two?
The left is the Coptic version and the right is the archaic or Egyptian version.
That's not incorrect, but it's not exactly the answer I'm looking for because they both are still productive in Coptic. They're still in active use in Coptic. So it's just a choice of when to use one or the other. So when would you use ha? When would you use haro?
The left is standalone and the right is when it's used as prefix.
Right. So what's it a prefix for? If it's used as a prefix, what comes next?
For an object.
And the object is in the form of what grammatical part of speech? Is it a verb? Another preposition?
Noun.
Close.
Or pronoun.
Pronoun. Yes, that was what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So you only use the, let's see, left or right. You only use the right one before a pronominal object. And then you use the left one before a nominal object. So it could be like, On the table or on it. That's what would determine which one to use.
Does that mean that it's actually wrong if you use the one on the left-hand column for a pronoun?
Well, how would you do that, TV? How would you use the one on the left hand? So if I were to say on the table, hit trapeza, how would I say on it?
Or how about on that? Would it be wrong to say something, to use the ones on the left-hand side to indicate on that, on it, on him, on her?
Well, on that could still be like hite, although that seems kind of strange to me. But on it would have to be hios. You can't say his. If you're going to put the feminine pronoun on the end of the preposition, like on it, it has to be hios.
Okay.
And it's really this, you can think of it kind of like Legos. Like this one is like those, it's like those Legos that only have the connector on one side and then they're like smooth on the other side. Whereas this one has the connector, on both sides, so you can actually plug in the other thing. You can't plug anything onto this one. You have to have this one because it has the point of connection. That's what this little like angled equal sign is for. It's actually showing that connection that can connect to a pronoun. So you can visualize it like Legos, like I said, or you can think of it like, remembering back to high school chemistry class. These are atoms with no valence electrons or whatever, and then these are like ions that can form compounds with other things, right? So these are modular. They can attach to pronouns, and these are not. They can't really attach to anything.
That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure if that made it better or worse, but choose whichever metaphor works for you. These ones have a point of attachment, and then these ones do not. So these ones go before nouns, which are already kind of independent and can just be stuck with anything else. Whereas these go before suffix pronouns, which, as their name suggests, cannot stand independently. They must be suffixed to something. And then here's all the like different paradigms. It's not quite all of them, but it's enough of them that you get the gist. The main weird thing that comes out of this is the first person. It's just this E vowel or Y semivowel, and then on prepositions that end in a T, it's just nothing, because all the E vowel does is protect the T from being lost, but then the E vowel itself is lost. So it's marked by the absence of any pronoun at bait because of me. Anyway, okay. Okay, I know that part is especially difficult. It takes a lot of getting used to, but like all things, language, it's just a function of time. And here are some examples of using the different pronouns, the different preposition pronoun combos. And then we learned a new verb form, MP voc. I did not go. This corresponds to Michael. What is the affirmative counterpart of MP voc?
ivoc.
Ivoc, very good. Okay. What about the affirmative counterpart of empu voc?
They did not go. They went alvoc.
Good. Yes. Alvoc. Okay.
I thought you could ask me the hard one.
Empevoc.
Yeah. The alvoc? I can't remember.
Arvoc. Yep. Good. Well done. So the second person feminine is weird, but yeah. I mean, if it's any help to know, it is very rare in Coptic texts for anyone to speak to a woman. So it was a male-dominated society. It was a male-dominated society before the advent of Christianity. Christianity made things worse, of course. And then Islam came. So yeah, the women in Egypt just can't catch a break. But yeah, you don't see a lot of text where someone is directly addressing a woman. There are a few cases in the New Testament where Jesus speaks to women, because of course, you know, that was he's speaking to women that other people are refusing to speak to, and that's like part of his mission. But it's very, very rare. Or hymns that address Mary will use the second person feminine, but again, it's quite rare.
Some guys who are married forget how hard it is to talk to girls sometimes.
I think they do, especially a lot of these nerds who are sitting around in monasteries writing Coptic texts. I think the inability to talk to women is a much larger component of their careers than they would like to admit. I'm not sure, but yeah.
Somewhere in the Vatican Library, there's a Coptic book that has been repressed. It's all about how to pick up chicks.
Yep, I'm sure there is. Yeah. Anyway.
Pimsleur Coptic.
Is that what it is?
I don't know. Pimsleur always seems to start out with the Pimsleur series. Always seem to start out with a sort of a pickup line.
That's funny.
I was thinking of the mystery, the Coptic translation of the mystery method.
Oh, I don't know what these things are, and I think I'm going to leave it that way. I'm sure these are some of those like terrible, not you know, not criticizing you guys, but there's all these like terrible like the red pill things that are just like how to be a creep in 10 steps. I just avoid those things like the plague. Yeah. I'm married, so it doesn't really matter if I try to read those things.
What's a nice girl like you doing in a vestibule like this?
Wow. Does that ever work? I don't know. I doubt it. Okay, anyway, so final bit of review, and then we'll be done for the day because we spent a lot of time reviewing, which is good, is the various forms of the different verbs. So we've learned verbs before. At first, you learned just the one infinitive form, and now you have to learn the different forms of the verb that can attach to different things. So in the case of so, which means to drink, you could have I so imp mo, I drink the water. I'm just going to write all these out so we can see all of them together. Let's get some spare paper. Okay. So I so imp mo is, what does that mean? TV, what does it mean? I so imp mo.
Well, you already said that it means I drink the water.
Did I? Damn it, I was hoping I didn't say it out loud. Okay.
You did.
I don't remember what I said.
You didn't, but I just slurped it right out of your mind.
Wow, amazing skills. What about this one? I sep mo.
I drink, namely the water. Probably not.
It means the same, isn't it?
It's the same. Yeah, I drank the water. So what's changed here is that we have the noun going directly against the verb. So the direct object goes just next. It's just mo. We don't need this preposition to attach the direct object. Right here, we need mo if we use this form of the verb. In this case, we can just stick the verb on directly. So there's a rule in Coptic that says this construction is only allowed with specific tenses. It's a really long story, and the rule is not 100% perfect, and it's super confusing. And I honestly don't remember it perfectly. But basically, with the preterite or perfect tense, I can just attach them directly. If this were present tense, I wouldn't be allowed to do that. And it's just kind of this arbitrary rule of Coptic grammar, but you can forget everything I just said because you don't actually need to start constructing Coptic sentences yet. All the sentences you'll be given will follow this rule correctly, and you'll have plenty of time to gain experience before you actually have to try to construct this and get that rule right. And then what about I saw? Anybody?
Drank it.
I drank it. Yeah. And, you know, I was thinking of the water, but it could be any it. And then it uses this form of the verb, the sima oo form.
If it's got a f at the end, does that mean that is a masculine noun that it refers
Yes.
to?
Yes. I could also say isos. But then I'd be referring to, my first instinct is to say the milk, which is erodi, which is feminine, but I don't know. I drank it, whatever it is, feminine. And then we get a bunch of examples like this. When you look in the dictionary at verbs from now on, you will get these multiple forms. You will actually normally get 4 forms, with the 4th being the qualitative, which we haven't learned yet. So just, you know, try not to freak out if you see 4 forms, and just trust that we will soon learn what that 4th form is all about. And be excited, because it's very exciting, this 4th form.
What do you do for a lot of the like flashcards that you made from Lambden? They have like just like the base form and the qualitative form, but they don't have the other like 2 forms. So how would you do those?
So I'm not looking at them, so I don't know for sure, but I suspect that those are intransitive verbs. Intransitive verbs can have a qualitative, which is a little bit confusing because the qualitative is roughly similar to the perfect participle in English. So the qualitative, like do, the qualitative would essentially mean done, or go, the qualitative would mean essentially gone. Write, written, etc. There are plenty of examples of intransitive verbs that have qualitatives. In those cases, you wouldn't get these 2 other forms because these really only come up if you have to have a direct object. And since intransitive verbs by definition don't have direct objects, you won't have those forms. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense.
I should have put little like dashy things in the flashcards to show that like those are missing. I don't know whether I did or not, but yeah. And you could also, like maybe the entry in our vocabulary doesn't have those 2 forms, but most Coptic verbs can be used either transitively or intransitively, kind of at will. So you might be able to derive those missing forms. Perhaps they never showed up in a Coptic text, but presumably a native Coptic speaker would have no trouble inventing those forms if they ever needed them. Just as in English, we can, you know, use our knowledge of the way English works to invent new words pretty easily.
Are there some specific verbs that are transitive in Coptic and not in Anglaise, or the opposite?
There definitely are. There are, let's see, there are quite a few verbs that are reflexive in Coptic, but not in English. That's the one that stands out to me the most. But then there are verbs like, so kote can mean to, it's like to turn, basically is its core meaning, but it can also mean like to return. So you can say like, I turned myself back towards home, or you can say, I returned home, or you could say, I turned the object. So you can put an object on it. But yeah, let's see.
Perhaps I'm actually thinking of reflexive rather than transitive. I'm thinking about, for instance, in German, rasieren sich. So Americans using American English would say, oh, I shaved today. But Germans have to say, I shaved myself today, to make it clear that this person did not have a great time shaving somebody else this morning.
Yeah. Yes, there are definitely things like that. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but there definitely are. There are quite a few Coptic verbs that are necessarily reflexive. where you can't use them non-reflexively. There are Coptic verbs that are intransitive that we might think of in English as being transitive, and vice versa. There are definitely Coptic verbs that are intransitive, which we think of as being transitive. Let's see. So like chope is like to create, but it's not actually transitive. It's only intransitive. So it's like kind of like to be created or to create itself, or we say like to come into being or to become. That one's just really hard to translate because half the time you see it, it's like, well, it means create, but when you say it in English, it just doesn't make any sense. So you kind of have to just understand the Coptic on its own terms. We'll see quite a few examples like that, I think. But TV, if you can, keep an eye out for them, and just make a note when they appear, because we can definitely take a look at that kind of thing.
Yeah, thinking about how I think you mentioned before the idea of that Coptic uses the phrase passed out of life to talk about death. And this seems to be a similar thing about coming into being, that it has a richness that English does not have.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely has a depth of nuance that really no English word can convey. Yeah, there's quite a few of those, and there's a few of them in reverse too. There are English words that do a huge amount of like heavy lifting in terms of information transmission that Coptic just doesn't have a word for. So yeah, finding those things can be pretty fun. Okay, so are there any questions about what we have studied in class thus far?
Am I on? Yes. I had a quick question. In the syllabus, you made a little chart. There was a word that popped up in one of the exercises. I forget, it was in 10 or 11. That was the dative of you all, like to you all.
Mm.
And I don't think Lambden explains that anywhere. No, go down more. Yeah, right there. So that Nathan, it popped up in an exercise, and it took me forever. I couldn't find it anywhere in the book, in the dictionary, in anything. And then I saw it here. So that's what this is, right? These are like datives for the pronouns, right?
Yeah. And
yeah.
I
So
think that's
why
probably
is that
just an
one so
oversight.
weird? Why is that one so weird? The other ones are straightforward.
I have no idea. So that's something I've been wondering about for a while. It is Nathan in Saidic, and it's Noten in Bohairic. Why
Right.
the O vowel? And the O vowel actually makes perfect sense if it were originally an A vowel, and then here it is stressed in open syllable. We would expect omega. Why do you get eta in Saidic? Great question. Whoever figures out what in the world is happening with eta in Coptic, is kind of a minor hero in Egyptology, because really nobody knows. So there's an article by Lambden, I think, about the different etymological sources of eta. Most people believe that eta derives from what was originally a long U vowel, so like oo, and the evidence for that comes from things like the Amarna letters, where they write out Egyptian names. Places where we later have an eta in the same word in Coptic have an oo sound in the cuneiform. All of that's a little uncertain. Cuneiform doesn't represent vowel sounds very precisely for the most part. But yeah, seems to be the case. But then there are other etas that very clearly come from a case of like a vowel shift from diphthongs like I. Just as in English, we say words like main, for example, M-A-I-N. Why isn't that mine when it's spelt like mine? Well, because the AI combination that sounds like I, went through a shift into sounding something like A. There are plenty of examples in Coptic where the eta clearly comes from an AI diphthong at some point in the past. It's correlated with the presence of glottal stops and consonantal roots. So there's probably a situation where there was vowel hiatus, and then those vowels merged into some kind of diphthong, and then through a vowel shift that became eta. It's just a total mess. So why is there an eta in the word Nathan? I don't know.
That is what
Yeah.
it means. I was just surprised because Lambden doesn't explain that anywhere. He just dropped it into one of the exercises without, figuring you'd just figure it out or something. But
Yeah, and that's why it's in the syllabus, because I think we noticed
Yeah.
somewhere along the way that he never
Yeah.
actually gives all the forms. So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Just wanted to double check.
Any other questions before I let you guys go? So homework is exercise 15. Exercise 12. Did I say 15? Why did I say 15? Exercise 12. So we'll go over exercise 12 in class next time, and we'll start looking at lesson 13 together.
Thanks very much.
Yep. Thanks for being here, everyone. I'll see you
thanks
next
a
week.
lot.
See you.
Good week.